Cyprus is a very small economy, as you mentioned, so everybody felt like, oh, this is not really a systemic risk, and therefore, we can be very stringent and very tough. And they went for this odd measure of trying to confiscate, essentially, parts of people's savings or people's bank accounts. And with that, they have created a systemic risk because they have taken a lot of the trust we hold in banks. And you've seen how the bank stocks were affected of the Southern European rim banks. And it will go further because how can we now? They've gone for something that was off limits. So they have turned something that could have been a small thing where one could have had maybe also bilateral talks with maybe Russia, who has big interests in Cyprus, and get this on the quiet out by taking this aggressive stance. They've turned it into something that actually has become systemic.
But the German Chancellor is saying that there is no alternative, and people need to tell the Cypriots that this is the only party in town, either take it or leave it. Your banks will not open. Is there an alternative?
Well, I think there is an alternative because, you've seen now that, if you look at, there's certain countries who have a lot of dealings, who are quite rich, who have a lot of dealings with Russia, such as, for instance, Russia. Cyprus is a great money laundering place. So you could talk, and Mr. Putin would probably love to stick it to the Europeans. So I think there are alternatives. Israel is quite close to Cyprus, so there will be alternatives.
I was reading an article about China looking very interested in assets in Cyprus that may come up for sale.
And let's not forget one thing. If you're Russia, you have sort of no base anymore in the Mediterranean. The only one is Syria, which is why they're supporting Syria. So having some deals with the Cypriots, why not?
Interesting one. And as we've mentioned, the finance minister is in Moscow now, Cyprus's finance minister. So we'll see how that all pans out. Financial Times, front page, they've also got Cyprus, they've got the Pope, and they've got Chancellor Osborne, our finance minister, who has got a day that he may love, he may hate it, I don't know, but it's budget day, and he's not got an easy message to deliver at all, has he?
Well, I really don't worry whether he loves it or hates it. I sort of think it's more important whether the economy will love it or hate it, and the people will love it or hate it. And, it's 2.5 billion for sort of going into infrastructure is good, but it's not enough. And I've declared that before. I'm a Keynesian, so...
That's not spending, though, is it? That's moving money around.
That's moving money around, yes.
Spending.
It's not new spending. And, it's good that he keeps hospitals, health and education safe. But then I look at the forces, our poor boys who have to, go all over the world. We are fighting so many fires, and we keep on cutting the budget of the armed forces. It's quite scary.
Cornelia, do you think it's time to take a leaf from the book of the American example, if you like? Over the past few years, the Obama administration has tried to spend its way out of an economic crisis. They've created a massive debt as well. It's a difficult choice to make, even if you want to use that example.
Yes, but the massive debt, to be fair, the massive debt has not been created really by the Obama administration. The massive debt has been created by the previous Bush administration, Bush II, and the various forays into various wars.
Just to say, the area's ring-fenced, as you mentioned, healthcare, education, very important, but also foreign aid is ring-fenced as well. And many in the UK are kind of saying, hang on a second, is now not the time to sort of try and get the UK economy back on track by spending more in the UK as opposed to sending it overseas?
That is very wise not to cut foreign aid, because it's how we as Britain make ourselves popular. It's actually quite a cheap PR budget, and it's creating future markets for our wonderful goods.
Let's move on to the China Daily, a picture of President Xi Jinping meeting the U.S. Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew, all smiles. Well, we know that the relationship between the two countries is difficult. Cornelia, do you think that the mutual interest driven by trade will perhaps force the U.S. and China to deal at the table as opposed to...
These are the two largest economies in the world. We all depend on them dealing with it. And if you're Russia, if you're the U.S., and you have so many, you've sold so many of your treasury bills to the Chinese, you do have to get along with one of your big creditors. Also, where they have obviously issues is China's aggressive stance geopolitically.
I mean, the reason this is a big story is because they're both new in the job. And the hope is, okay, they're both new, maybe a new relationship can be forged.
Well, you know, the interests will remain interests. And so they do have to get along, but there will be issues that worry the US, such as, you know, how they act in their backyard or in the South China Sea, in the East China Sea.
The Gulf news now, and there's been a steady stream of bad news for Boeing with its Dreamliner problems, and now we have some good news. But Ryanair is to purchase $15.5 billion worth of 175 passenger jets from Boeing, and looking to expand into the European market.
Well, that's very good. And I mean, I'm a big fan of Boeing. They have great aircraft. The thing is, it's again Mr. O'Leary who is very good at getting bargains. And I'm sure at this current time of Boeing, he's been able to get a good bargain because they needed that big order. So, you know, smart businessman.
Okay, we've got the Pope, and the headline says, "Don't cry for me, Argentinian." And it's this young little boy who I think found the whole thing a little bit too scary, maybe.
Well, but I loved the fact that he calls himself after St. Francis of Assisi, who is there for the poor, for the bereft, and for the animals, by the way. He's the patron saint of the animals. But the other thing is, when you look at the mass he gave, he really said, let's look after the poor. And we often say, let's look after the poor and the children. He brought in the elderly, and I think that's so important.
From poor to very rich.
The other extreme, perhaps really no surprise, but the top richest footballers in the world, David Beckham, is at the top.
But you know, he seems to be, I don't know him, but he seems to be an utterly nice guy. And usually it's not the utterly nice guys. It's not usually the utterly nice guys that get that rich.
About the football, is it? It's probably about the other business assets he has. I mean, he's a brand in himself, isn't he?
He's a brand in himself, and he's very good in defending that brand and positioning a brand. He's a good businessman.